promoting you and what you do. This is OIC Studio Podcast. Interviews, discussions, live reading, music performances, and more. Here is your host, James Bryant.
Today we're sitting in the studio with Damon Freed. Hello, Damon.
Hi, James.
How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Great. We're going to get to know Damon a little bit more. So we'll ask some questions and we'll see how this goes. Why does Damon Freed write?
Why do I write? Well, James, I think it's a personal expression, and in that regard, the reason I write is to express myself. But I think, in turn, it educates people. Sensibilities are stimulated by specific writings that I do, and what I mean by that is there's a certain coarsening to a person, and it can go the other way, which I prefer, which is a certain softening of the individual, and an uplifting sort of vibe there, or spirit moves forth through the poem, through the poetry. And that's ultimately what I am after.
And when did Damon begin to start writing seriously?
I started in 2005 writing seriously, James. I would write vigorously, often, and quickly, but I would revise, even from the beginning. Even the earliest poems that I did, there were always revisions, and I would sit with them for weeks at a time, months at a time, and I would revisit that poem. So I put my poetry out there sometimes before it's hatched, and developed fully. But I learned through that experience. So unfortunately, sometimes my listeners, readers, are getting something a little undone, a little too early. But I always come back to them, the poems, the poetry, and what I do then is to edit, to revise. And what I mean by edit is sometimes words, lines, whole lines. I mean, sometimes you just got to get rid of that stuff, the negativity that may arise or happen in a poem. I just wrote something. In thinking of our interview, James, I did put some notes down to my phone there. I'm not going to read them, but I remember this one thought I had. It kind of arose, and in the process, I think it's always best to be honest. That's how I write, and sometimes I have to lie in the writing to get to the honesty. And then at that point in time, you have to end the poem by transforming the lie into a truth of sorts. So, and what I mean by sorts, a sort of truth, is that for me, truth resides somewhere between fact and fiction, oftentimes. Once that poem is out there, something changes. I have a broader idea, visualization of what that might mean. Something happens in the transferal there when it goes from my personal computer, my PC, to a broader context. Then my mind, I'm thinking, essentially more universally about the reader. And that is compassion. That's the kind of compassion that a poem needs, I think. And so it's become a tool for me. Now, I hope my readers don't mind that so much, this hopefully will act to educate them somewhat about how that process takes place. Yeah.
What has been the easiest thing for you as a writer? And then as a follow-up to that, what would be the hardest thing about writing?
Gosh, there's no easy part of writing, James. There is no easy part. It's a difficult... Sometimes I will say... One thing I can say about that is that once the poem is begun, it flows. There's a clearing of the underbrush. You have to... Well, yeah. You have to reach that place inside of you that writes. And in that sense... It's an automatic. It becomes a very conscious, a very aware state of mind that the words, the phrases, everything flows out. Now, what I'm trying to say, I actually hear these tiny voices. I had an instructor. I went to school for painting. This is about my writing, but it overlaps. But with my writing, my instructor in college said, Damon, you got to listen to the voices. Now, I don't know how literally she actually meant that, James. But those inner cues, those inner, I have actually family, vocalizations that come through my mind as to what possibilities exist in terms of my writing. Now, the difficult part is here's what I'm trying to say. At times, when I want to write, now I sound like a schizophrenic, which I do have schizoaffective disorder, which is a lighter sort of diagnosis there. But my main thing is I'm bipolar. I have been diagnosed. So this is part of the illness, the disease. So with bipolar and a schizoaffective disorder ailment, essentially what that means to me in my world is that there are multiple layers of voices, vocalizations, I should say, that I can auditorily hear that aren't present to others outside of me, obviously, but they are to me when I go to write. And I either brush those aside for a more genuine, personal account of what it is I'm trying to say. But those voices guide me to a better understanding of what it is that I want to say in any given piece at any given time. When I want it to be me, when I am centered at the keyboard, then I don't allow that to take place as much. I didn't like the phrase I used there, brush them aside, the vocalizations, because they're always present, most times. I mean, there are quiet times in my mind, of course, but, certainly when I'm paint, but even then, I have to cope, and with the voices there and the vocalizations. So is what I would rather call them as vocalizations, because it seems more accurate to me. So once that's said and done, ultimately that has become my process. Now I'm the one writing. Let's get that straight, right? I'm the one doing the work. But, the world always plays a role. So, no matter how abstract, and I've said this before about my painting, no matter how abstract the poem, gets, it somehow has to be yourself, and is myself writing. These other things, are kind of distractions in the end.
Who are your greatest influences when it comes to writing?
I would say my greatest influence was my first influence, Emily Dickinson. The reason I say that is that's how I got my start. Now, she's not my influence now. I don't write that way anymore. My style has shifted. She was a bit of an inspiration early on, and as was William Butler Yeats, his work. Both of their poetries and styles have permeated my own to a slight degree. So I wouldn't really be affiliated with them now. You know, you wouldn't read my work and say, I don't think a person would say, oh, well, this comes out of Yeats, this comes out of, who else did I read? Langston Hughes or, one of the some of those early influences on me, some of those early inspirations, rather. Now, my greatest influence is in recent days, James, to answer your question more precisely, is Jack Kerouac's work. On the Road, October in the Railroad Earth. That's about it.
I see you brought a couple of poems. Would you like to share one at this point?
I would love to, James. These are attributed to somewhat of an early influence of mine, Edgar Allan Poe, but they're not written in the same style. But I would love to, James. They are somewhat macabre. Or this one poem that I will read, A Carrier of Souls. At night, I go home to an abandoned place, where the monsters and ghouls show their faces, where the vents all bellow a haunting sound, where the heater groans when just I'm around, where I'll unlock my rusty gate and do my best to concentrate on all that is holy and everything light. For the dead, otherwise, are bound to fright. I'm told they have woken to capture the flesh of some godly boy they've yet to catch. I'm told this boy is young and wise. I'm told this boy can hear their cries. I'm told this boy can navigate their despot souls from earth to heaven's gate. I'm also told he waits for something unknown. Perhaps it is for the proper groan. Or perhaps it's for the proper rite of passage into day from night, or from sin to virtue. Nonetheless, it's that blood-curdling curfew. When it's time to turn the hinges on a house brimmed with gasps and cringes, where the curtains sway without a breeze, where the mind is fraught and teased by the shrillest sounds and throatiest voices, where I'm tempted to damn them with my choices, for I am the one whom they'd like to discover in the midst of the night, beneath the covers. Yes, I am the one to send them south with the simplest whisper from my mouth. For I have been the judge of ways for many and many and many of days.
Well done. I like that. You have one more poem. Would you like to share that as well?
I would love to. Penetrated by the night, you'll wake ready and full of life, for a thrill so deep and rife. But this Hallows Eve is especially dark. It echoes the devil, a knife, and his mark. He's a ghost in the leaves and the rain. He's the host of your lament and your pain. Even still, you'll gather your kids on this evening and dress them all in cloaks for sweet receiving. But the candy is as if tainted and old, the apples all wormy and covered in mold. And something's wrong you know you can tell. Everywhere you look, it's hell. And you think you're innocent, but you've been sold to the highest bidder on the dizziest night of the year. And all the children are swarming, and you hear a sound. Suddenly the mist is thick, and the gloom surrounds. A shape appears above the ground. A porchlight looms, not far in the distance, silhouetting the shape's faint existence. But the glow flickers, and barely lights in this instance. So you hold on tight to your children and hop the fences, then turn to run among the fallen branches, but the limbs and twigs stifle your advances. As you twist and turn, you crash upon a puddle. You see a reflection, but your vision is muddled. And the atmosphere is chaos, but your vision resumes. It's your two red eyes that reflect in the gloom.
Okay, yeah, that was well written, and thank you for sharing that. What puts you into the creative mindset?
What puts me into the creative mindset for a poem like that, not to be so shallow with my answer here, but rhythms, which isn't shallow. It's a technical sort of response, but maybe I'm being too hypercritical of myself here. But yeah, rhythm, prose, prosody, in terms of like I like to write sometimes lyrical prose.
Mm-hmm.
What puts me in the mindset, maybe it'll help if I kind of flush out exactly what my process is. I often, I'll sit down at the computer, I'll pull up Word, which is a program there that I write on. That's the typical, and I write directly into the computer there. And, I don't fetter much in terms of what it is that I write and what I know will work. Fetter. Well, I'm fettering here in this interview, but I promise you, it's funny because I don't toy around much with the words. It either works or it doesn't, and I kind of by now have a feeling for what works and what doesn't. I've been doing it for a while now, but there's always improvement. I hope I get better. But the mindset, there's an artist who once said, the lead singer of Big Thief, which is a band, she said, somehow I have got to get out of my own way, and then I write. And then it's not, this is me talking now. And then it's not me. It's not the self, the primordial, conqueror of men and what have you. Another one of my favorite people, said, I remember when I was born, the moment I was born, I was going to cut through this life with a tiny little sword, and it would be victory after victory after victory. And she also says, you just can't live that way. It's impossible. You have to relinquish pride.
You hang around with a guy named Lucas Russell, and you guys collaborate. And so tell me about Lucas and what it is that you guys collaborate on, and how long you guys been doing that.
Lucas and I, we don't hang out. He is in Kansas City, Missouri, and I am here in Sedalia with you, James. So we don't really have an opportunity that frequently. He works a lot on his work, and works a lot. He works at the Voodoo Lounge. He's a great guy, a great individual, and he makes an incredible background musical variations for the work. He somehow is able to tune in visually, I think, to what it is that is written, and through his, now I'm guessing, but through his imaginative process there, come up with sounds, come up with soundtracks almost. A lot of them are like if you were to score a movie or something. And, actually, after we had done 4 or 5 pieces together, where I write, and then he creates the music for the pieces, for the poems, he actually got a gig scoring a film there. In terms of, I couldn't tell you the title of the film. I can't remember. A friend of his hired him to do it, though. So, but Lucas is a serious guy. He, is the sound engineer and manager of a couple different things there at the Voodoo Lounge in Kansas City.
If you could be the original author of any famous writing, whether it's a poem or prose or a novel, what would that be?
It would be Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. The reason is because it's dealing with solitude and the interruption to solitude. I read it earlier today. It's one of my all-time favorite poems, if not my greatest. His style of writing and his way of working, his way of doing things in his writing. There's no one greater in my mind who dealt with the macabre. I mean, there's just no one. And I don't even know if that's the right word. Macabre, mystery, darkness,
Gothic,
absolutely. I think that's it's a Gothic sort of scene. I mean, the Raven, nevermore. Nevermore. And the Raven just keeps saying that over and over, and he doesn't know what to make of it. He doesn't. Did the Raven's master, prior master, say this to the Raven, and this bird, this dumb bird, just kind of repeating that, and it's kind of a tragic tale because, there's no resolution to the story, to the narrative, I should say, because it is a poem. There's no resolution in the end. He just leaves it open, mysteriously enough. And I, I read it today, and again for myself, and that's when I realized, wow, it's still new to me. It's still new. No matter how many times you read a legendary piece. That's why I think masterpieces are called masterpieces, right there, in a nutshell.
If you had the opportunity, Damon, to have someone famous, living or dead, to read one of your own works, say, one of your favorite poems.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, okay.
Yeah.
And why Bob?
I wrote an entire poem somehow. Then I read part of Tarantula. I'm guilty. I have not read the entire book. I didn't need to. I just didn't need to, at least not yet.
Who's that by?
That's by Bob Dylan.
Okay. It's like an autobiography?
Oh no, it's a creative work of his.
Okay.
It's a little known to my generation, I guess. Yeah. So but it's I'd say underrated severely, and It's incredible. It's incredible the way he writes in that novel, Tarantula. And it was kind of, I think the reason for its mystery of not being really praised more was because his music was so overriding. I mean, his folk ballads and his folk tunes, and he would probably hate me for saying folk ballads, but whatever. I am who I am, and he is who he is. And I'd love for him to read my poem, "The Last Saturday Night on Earth." I mentioned him in the poem, his work, and there's a. I wrote the poem, then I read his book, and it was kind of like, wow, two very distant generational modes, but a common line between them. A very common thread tying the impetus, the impulse behind my work to his.
Why is it that you write macabre material?
Honestly, if I were to answer that, the atmosphere, the vibe, the autumn, the fall season is my favorite. Mm-hmm. I must say. My goodness, the smell of leaves and rain, and after a rain, when the sun is drying, that sublime just warmth, when it's still not quite cold but chilly, and it's life and death competing.
So why do you enjoy collaborating with like-minded musicians and writers?
We are of the same flesh, and it gets people thinking. It gets people feeling in their feels, and that's what we need more of in this current time. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's like we gotta have something that does something to somebody in the form of in the realm of art that is not some idea-based, over-intellectualized, just kind of one-off. It has to be something. Like, it was just like that. I mean, I felt something there describing the autumn, the fall. It's like that, It has to be real, and it has to come out of you fresh, and it has to be alive. It has the spirit, man. I mean, that's what it's about. The spirit. That channels, whatever work channels that. And when that comes through, that uplifts people, because some, not all, identify with that.
We have been talking with Damon Freed. You can find out more about Damon by visiting his website, damonfreed.com. That would be DamonFreed.com. And any final words, Damon?
Be good, folks. I'm out.
Can we help promote you and what you do? Get in touch with us. Look for our contact information in the description below.